So what is magic?
We crave for the transcendent.
We're really talking about desire to engage with supernatural forces.
When we don't live authentic, we live under illusion. We live under a spell.
Welcome back to another episode of the Numerals Podcast. It's your girl, Breezy, and I am here with Mr. Adrian Crawford in a new location.
We are in my home away from home right here.
He doesn't have shoes or socks on.
Yeah,
right
I
now.
do have socks on. That's crazy.
I thought you were bare.
No, you think no, I'm not that much of a savage, but yeah, man. But it's like my home away from home. Shout out Fuma's Cigar Social and Lounge, and the fact that I'm here and I'm not smoking a cigar on this podcast because we have a bunch of other meetings today.
I know.
And
I said I can't. I
want to smell like I can't go change.
Going to the capital bit, wherever we're going after this.
It's all good. It's all good.
Well, we want to do a little bit of a location change, mostly because today we're not going to focus on magnum opus. We're going to continue throughout that series, but the New Rules podcast for a long time, we did episodes the first 3 weeks of every month, and now we're going to start throwing in a little bit more of special episodes on that, roughly around that fourth week.
Yep.
So we wanted to kind of switch it up a bit, and change up our environment. And we're also going to do a fun topic today. So I feel like the fact that it looks like we're in like a cavern deep underground is kind of fitting for what it is that we're talking about.
Yep. So yeah, today we're going to talk on this thing of magic. And so I know that's probably not what people come to the podcast to really hear about or thought they would ever hear about. But yeah, we're going to talk about it today.
Yeah, I feel giddy.
You've been hype about this one.
I'm so excited to talk about this. And the reason why is because I have like micro obsessions here and there where I just like find a topic and I just think about it for a very long time. And so this is one of those things that I've just been sitting on over the past few months and that we've been sitting on because we talked about starting this new business called Authentica.
Yep.
And we've been having conversations for a very long time of like, what category do we exist in?
Yeah.
We're a little Maverick-esque. So us trying to figure out what category we fit in is like asking us to solve the hardest math equation.
It is because it's like we
like to be different.
Yeah, we don't want to be put in a box. So
right. And so we always are like, we're not in that box because there's this little thing different about us. But I do think that it's also true about what we're building. Like I think that we are truly building something that doesn't exist in the world yet and isn't a category that has really been created in the way that we're looking to create it yet, which is human design.
Yep.
And so this conversation around magic really started when we were sitting in a room and we were like, what category are we in? I can't remember who said what, but we kind of came to this like, what about human design?
Yeah.
Because we love designers.
Yep.
We love designers of clothes, designers of ideas. And so we're like, well, ultimately what we do is we help humans uncover and unearth their original design. And we essentially architect the design process that helps them discover purpose.
Yeah.
And so we realize, okay, what about human design? Because we're kind of human designers. And then we looked up the category to find out that the category is a majority made up of astrology and magic. Yeah. And so that kind of like pushed our like convictions even further to realize that we wanted to kind of go into the space and bring a whole different perspective. The foundations I think are very different, but there's a lot honestly that overlaps, I would say, in what we do and what people hope to experience and get from practicing rituals and magic. So no better way to start off this conversation. So I just wanted to, I guess, just to start us off, like, what are some things that you've been observing and why do you think that talking about this right now is relevant?
Because I think that we are living really in, an identity crisis. I think we're living in a moment to where design, just even like stuff for magic into human design, human identity, human architecture is a really, really big thing right now. Because I think over the last probably 10 to 15 years with the rise of social media, one of the things that has happened is that and it's been very obvious, what these companies have done is to sell us an identity, right? It's to sell us an identity. If you have this type of device, if you wear these types of clothes, if you're on this type of platform, it just gives us, and then on top of that, they market then on those platforms according to the algorithm to sell you an identity. And I think what's happened is that a lot of people have fallen into that and fallen into that identity. And now when markets are changing, things are up in the air and just a little bit more unstable, I think people are starting to crack underneath that. And so when this happens, there's something you're going to go to because everybody's trying to find something. And I think that's why you're seeing the rise as well of this idea of magic and enchantment and other stuff, because it's what they like to call, I think it's a professor out of Yale who calls it the enchantment gap, that when society starts to go away from kind of like religion and other things like that, they're going to still look for something supernatural. And so this kind of magical, mythical thing comes involved.
So what is magic?
I mean, I think magic, I don't know what I don't know if right now if I should even ask. You know what? While we're here, since we like AI a lot, I'm going to ask you, going to sit here and I'm going to pull up my Chat GPT and ask Chat GPT. Yeah. And just say, here, let me do it real quick. What is magic?
Magic is the perception or act of making something happen in ways that defy natural or logical explanation. In a literal sense, it often refers to illusions, sleight of hand, tricks, or performances where the audience knows there's a method, but it's hidden. In a more symbolic or cultural sense, some people use magic to describe experiences of awe, wonder, or something that feels beyond everyday understanding.
Okay, so there's so many different avenues that we could go through with this, because we also are people of faith, and then there's also a cultural component, and then the cultural component is also so expansive because there's like major history to magic. It's existed for a very long time. We'll mostly talk about it from a Western cultural sense, but also I was been doing a lot of research on this, was refreshing up on it this morning. And so based off of that definition, I can't help but start by asking, there's a lot that it just described of what magic is that I would say would also make Christians magicians.
Yeah.
So is that like, what are your thoughts on that based off of that definition?
Based off of that definition, yeah. Because if you really look at it, it's just the idea of it's a perception or an act of making something happen in ways that defy natural logical explanation. So here's the thing, though. It's a perception or an act. It's not a definite thing. You know what I'm saying? So it could be like, oh, like it says, it's a sleight of hand. It looks real, but it's not. I think that the difference is, let me go back. I mean, there's something that people, I think in our current world, Christianity has its roots in a lot of mysticism, right? And there were Christian mystics, there were the Desert Fathers, there were people, guys, especially the early church. There were a lot of supernatural things that happened. I mean, there were things that people would say, oh, that's beyond just normal natural things.
Yeah, sorcery is so prevalent throughout the Bible.
It is. It was like stuff that would be seen as sorcery in the sense of like, oh, there were sorcerers. There's Simon the sorcerer in the Bible. But there also was this idea that like it's when it defies that, but for them, they were conjuring it up. And I think the difference is that as we've gone through like history, and especially in our time, we get a lot more, we've got a lot more anxiety. So we want to go control. So now what's happened, we have tried to in moments take some of the supernatural parts out of the Bible. Like, there's like the miracles and things like that. We're like, well, that's just only for the beginning of the church or whatever. But here's the truth about it. It's super, like the belief, let's say Christianity's belief, it's supernatural. We're banking everything that we believe that a dude came back to life. And then like when you say, oh, well, I don't know if God can still heal somebody. Are you freaking kidding me? I'm like, our whole thing is predicated on that belief. And so I think because it's predicated on that belief, I think that what that ultimately lands to and what that ultimately leads to is now we just try to move and we try to control things from there.
Right. Okay. So I also something too, I'll say when we say magic, I wouldn't say that we're necessarily referencing like magicians that stand in front of you with like cards. Now I love a good Now You See Me. It's like one of my favorite series ever. And I think there's a component of that overlaps, but I think we're really talking about the engagement or like desire to engage with supernatural forces that influence your perspective of identity and also your approach to day-to-day life.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I don't disagree with that. I think it is this idea that there are, in the day-to-day life of every human being, those things do take place, right? I do think it takes place in every part of life. I think that we actually are looking for things that are, especially in day-to-day, because you're trying to control. Like, we as human beings want to control things. That's the whole deal. We're trying to figure a way to always just control. How do we move forward? How do we do this? I don't know what's coming around the corner. So if I can figure a way to somehow conjure something up, if I can have this ritual routine that every time I do that, I can kind of control the outcome, then I'm going to do those things. And so, because I think human beings, we actually are beings that have to, like, we want to just have absolute control over stuff. And I think we invite that stuff in our life all the time.
Yeah. So why do you think that just we as human beings are like drawn to these things?
I think it's because of, like, I think we're made in the idea that we're made in the image of God, and because we're made in the image of God, what ends up happening is there's a supernatural being that we're created. And so because there is a supernatural being that created us, now where that puts us in is that we crave for the transcendent. So that's why we long for it. We know at the deep cores of a human, we know that there's more. That's why we're always trying to find more. Even though we will say, even people who are atheists and say they don't believe in this, they're still trying to find something transcendent, because we have been made in that image, and there's something that is transcendent beyond that'll push us through it, and as it actually goes through. So
right. So I guess another question too, though, is from a Western standpoint, really more of the practices have to do with like astrology, let's say. And oftentimes there's like a difference, I would say, between someone who's like engaging with dark magic of sorts with the attempt to control versus, and also like override someone's self-agency or override their own self-agency versus someone who is interested in something that tells them more about who they are. Like it's an act of enlightenment and an act of more related to purpose and related to identity. Because I want to say that just because I do come from a place of compassion here, because I get why that would be a regular practice, especially because oftentimes when we think of like, especially I say this from a Christian standpoint, when you think of things like magic, it's like evil, like Satan. I think that people who are like coming at it from a current Western perspective, like the average girl who's checking astrology, she's not like thinking about like trying to engage with like evil forces in order to control like some other outcome, is like, you know, practicing spells in her dorm room. Like she's just more so like, I want to know a little bit more about who I am and what I was created for. And this thing seems like it's telling me, and it seems pretty accurate. So I guess how would you begin to differentiate like the threshold between casually engaging with something to bring you like a sense of purpose and a sense of identity, which we do as Christians, crossing the threshold into something that is more ill-intended to control? Yeah,
I think but here's what my pushback would be is this. I totally agree with you. I think a lot of people who engage us, the intent is not like, oh man, you know, I'm trying to conjure up dark, demonic, whatever. But like, it's the difference between manslaughter and like first degree murder, right? It's about the intent, but somebody still dies. I think the fact that when people are out there trying to do these things, you think about the first, like, okay, let's look at this. The first enchantment, the first spell that we would see is in the Bible. It's the whole story. It's Genesis 3. It's when Satan shows up in the form of a serpent and whispers in the ear. And it's not like he shows up and he jumps up to this ginormous, huge being. It's a snake. And actually, Adam and Eve were familiar with this snake. The snake was there. It wasn't like, it's like, oh, like it was like, it seemed like it was it was there. But what happens is that, like, it was just like, hey, did he really say that? See, that's how it all starts. It's never like, we always think and I think that us as Christians, we make it to be like, oh, you know, like Harry Potter. If you watch Harry Potter, then like, you know, then you're a witch. And you're like, no, like it's like this idea though, that there's a small intent, and what it all comes back to, we're trying to find something outside of ourselves to control a situation or to know myself a little bit better, but also to be able to predict my future or whatever, because we want control. I think all of it comes back to control, because I think all human beings, that's what we want. We want to try to have control. And so we will look to anything sometimes to actually bring that. And I think that's kind of the root of it.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And I don't mean by any means to like water down
I know you don't.
practices or like the power of faith, especially when you're specifically putting your faith in God, in Jesus. But I'm also, I guess, the same intention that lives within them, that intention lives within me. I'm just saying that I believe that what I trust in is the ultimate authority.
Yes. Yeah. So you're saying what you trust in is the ultimate authority? You're saying like when somebody's...
Yeah, I'm saying what I believe. Yeah. I believe to be the ultimate authority.
Yes, absolutely. And I think for others, they are looking for... Again, it goes
There's
back...
no authority. Yes. There's no ultimate authority in astrology or like magic. It's self-help. So it's meant to come back to help you, inform you, to self-discover, to grow in your self-agency. Yeah. But from a Christian perspective, that's it. By putting that authority back into self, you're actually losing components of self-agency and freedom that can be gained by trusting in God.
Yeah, but I also think what's happening with people, I think people are actually... they are putting trust, and that trust is just in self. What you're ultimately saying, it's outside of you, and there's something that made us transcendent that actually helped, that you anchor in versus yourself. Because I think that's my thing. I think that's where humans want to go. At the end of the day, humans' default is that we want to be transcendent, and we want to just trust ourselves. You know what I'm saying? And I think that was again, according to a Christian tradition, that was the first fall. The fall was human beings decided, I want to be God. Yeah. And I think that's what humans have been doing ever since. And so now what we do is we try to tap in, because we are supernatural beings, right? I just believe so much in humanity. Humans are just these incredible beings that there's something it's beyond. When you look at someone, I think it was like C.S. Lewis who talks about this. It's like, you're not just looking at just a person. You are looking at a transcendent being made by a creator. And because of that, we're still trying to tap into that. But instead of going to the source, we actually want to become the source. And that, I think, is where the tension lies.
Yeah. So do you think that nature has any power over human beings?
Nature? I think nature only has power over human beings that we give it. I believe that human beings were called to steward creation. Now, when you talk about nature power, like the unpredictability of a natural disaster, things like that, I mean, you could say that. But as far as like, I don't know if it's like, oh man, like the sky or stars or trees or whatever. No, I believe human beings were actually called to be those who were to rule and steward over creation. Yeah.
So how do you make sense of and these are like conversations that I feel like we have offline a lot too. But I'm interested is like, how do you make sense of it is proven that the moon impacts human beings biologically. Yeah. Now, does it predict your future? I would say no. Yep. But how do you make sense of the fact that there's like, whatever can be going on with the moon and it can actually mess with like sleep cycles and things like that. And that's been proven to a point as true as like gravity.
Yep. Well, because I think that, again, that's an outside force that is just a part of the environment and the atmosphere. I think it's a part of how the world was made. And so, yeah, again, I don't have to say a ton about that, but it definitely can affect. I mean, just like if going outside when they say go outside, when you're depressed, to go outside and get sunlight on your face, right? Why it changes you. And so I do think,
that's a great comparison.
Yeah, and I do think there is those things that are out there that allow us to actually grow and helps us in the environment. But does that rule over us? No, that aids us, that helps us. I think creation is here to help and aid humans, not to rule over us. Just like, I can go out there and there's some type of, you take like aloe or something like that, right? And if you have a burn, it helps you, right? And I think that's what, it doesn't rule over you. Now it's helping heal you, but it doesn't rule over you. It's assistant. I think creation was meant to be that. It was meant to be something that we rule over, and it's something that was meant to aid humans. And we're called to use creation for the betterment of each other. And I think that's where I would say kind of when it comes to like overall, like nature and creation and stuff like that.
Yeah. So how do you personally like recognize within yourself when you're starting to put trust into like nature over creator?
Yeah, I think for me, it doesn't go so much into like superstition or things like that. When I was younger, right, it would be things like that. It would be that I was a Christian, but I had like this little green like Gideon's Bible, right, that I would like read before a game, even though I don't really remember anything in there, but I would do it. Why? Because if I sat in the right place, I did it this many times, then I was going to get the good luck was going to be on my side that day. I was going to play super well, the whole nine. So that's what it came down to. But then I started realizing, I'm like, oh, that was just a part. That was just something I was doing. That didn't affect if I play well, not going to play well, whatever it may be. Right. But now how it plays out more for me is trusting more in like, I can find myself trusting a lot more in just kind of like my ability. I can trust more in the people I'm listening to, like listening to different people, right, on podcasts or whatever. I can begin, these are creation. I can begin to listen to that or these products they made and how I feel like, if I do this type of breath work or these types of things, that'll help me, like, I don't know, get greater enlightenment, which again, some of those things are helpful. But at the end, when I find myself, here's what it comes down to. When I find myself wanting control, that's when it becomes different for me, because then I want to control something. And so, because again, when anxiety hits, whatever, you want to control. So what's one thing for me I have to fight? Like creation, food. That's something like I have to fight, because like when I have high anxiety, whatever, it's something that in that moment I can control. I can control what I'm doing. No,
and it offers you like regulation.
Comfort. Yes, it actually comfort and regulation, and it's kind of one of those things where it kind of plays like honestly, it's crazy to say, it kind of plays like a god, right? Because it's like, like you said, it brings me comfort in that moment. It kind of can regulate what I'm feeling right there in that moment, and so I think what I have to do in those moments is always remind myself, no, I don't. It does not rule over me. I rule over it.
So, how do you? I feel like so much of this conversation is like, I feel like we've been clear about what we think is black and white, and then so much in the in between is where wisdom applies. So I would know people who like your game time ritual, like hyper Christian, that would be like magic, sorcery, because you feel like that could be connected to you winning. Even though that it's not connected to you winning, it just might be the act of doing that thing offers you like a momentary sense of solace that helps you play better. And so like, how do you approach the wisdom of like, well, this thing isn't my God, even though it brings me like momentary like relief and a sense of control that does ultimately lead to a good outcome for what I'm doing right now, versus now I'm like starting to believe that this thing carries more weight over like the state of my life and like my purpose than what I really should be giving it.
Yeah, that's great. No, I think it's because when you start thinking those things, those steps, if I don't do those steps, then I won't play well. If I don't do that steps, I won't get this deal. Or if I don't do these things, bad things are going to happen in my marriage, or something happens to my kids or whatever when I don't do these things. Now you're saying those things have power versus like, no, these things are to aid. Remember we talked about those things are to aid me in regulation, aid me into focus, aid me into thinking, to ground me, versus it being something that they're going to, by some way of magic or some way of, supernatural, defy this, me being able to go in, and because I helped this person across the street, I got the good parking spot on campus, right? It's stuff like that, to where I feel like that's when it becomes a deal. And I think that all the time, and like I think that with humans, and I heard, I want to go back to what you said earlier. I think sometimes, and I know we're, normally we talk about a lot of different things, and we're very open about what our faith is. And I know we're talking a lot more about it today. I actually feel, though, that sometimes you're right. I think that as Jesus followers, we can become so critical and not empathetic toward people who many times are just like, they're not trying to like, conjure up something like evil, even though we understand. Because here's the truth about it. The Bible says very clear, all of us. Literally, if Christians really want to do it, get to the Bible. You read Ephesians chapter 2. Ephesians 2 says that, like, at one point, like, we all run under the influence of Satan. Every last one of us. And nobody would ever say, very few people say, you know what? Yeah, I worship Satan. Like, no, but the Bible's super clear. It says all of us, because sin lives in us. We all at one point in time were on that team.
Yeah.
And we believe this by the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus. You're now in that belief that you're transferred now on the other team. And so that is where I think so many times we don't have a lot of empathy for people who many times, man, they're struggling. They're trying to find something beyond themselves. And I think just saying, oh, magic and this and da-da-da, you kill like that. I mean, even like, and again, like when people get on Harry Potter or like,
I'm gonna get to
or like Lord of the Rings and things like that, I'm like, dude, you kill creativity in humans. You know what I'm saying? You kill creativity, and I think that is something in the wonder of stuff. So
I have like 5 questions lining up in my mind, but where I'm going to start is like, okay, so for me, I'm an obsessive person, and thank God that I have, I feel like taught very young that it is good to have ambition in a way that's obsessive about things that are good.
Yep.
But because of that, I can also be like sitting on an airplane or like laying down in my bed at night praying. And then, when you pray for one person and then you're like, now I have to pray for this person and now I have to pray for this person. And I have to pray for this person. And if I don't pray for that person, like this thing is going to happen to them. And that can kind of be the shadow side of it. I bring that up because I feel like that ties into your superstition point and like how superstitions, if like this engagement with like magic or like sorcery is on like a spectrum, like there's a component of like obsessiveness and superstition that exists early on in that spectrum that we all have access to. Have you ever found yourself in that place where you're just like, if I don't do this thing, like even as a person of faith, like something is going to happen?
100%. Like, I feel like, I mean, listen, we don't want to say this, but a lot of times people who are of faith practice like sorcery and things like that. They quote scripture like it's literally like they're saying a spell that, like they're out there and it has nothing to do with it, but I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. You're like, well, no, you can't. And what that was, and literally it's all out of context. It's like Paul wrote that in the sense of like he learned to be content in all situations. Yeah. So I mean, when I have a lot, when I have a little, some people will be like, oh, I can do all things through Christ. You're like, no, you can't. You cannot do that. You're like, that's not in your wheelhouse, right? So what are you doing? You're like praying magic over your life to think it's going to make you supernaturally all of a sudden be able to make the varsity basketball team when like you're 4'1". Like you're not, you know what I'm saying? Like you can't do all things, right? I think the other thing too, I found myself at times doing that when, you have a big meeting, you have a presentation, you have something you're doing, and then you feel like, oh man, like let's just say you have a moment that week or a couple moments that week where you are, where you're frustrated, you're angry, the way you respond, the thoughts that maybe you had or whatever that don't line up to the scripture or whatever, then all of a sudden, what do we do? You start about, oh man, this is going to go bad. So when it goes bad, what do we think? Oh, it's because these things happen, this didn't happen. So what you're saying is that if I practice these things, I get this output. That's no different than like sorcery, is that if I do these things, then I get this outcome. Now, when I say that, there is the idea of sowing and reaping and things like that. But I think so many times I have to remind people in Christianity, it's like when you actually sit back and I ask them that one simple question, I'm like, how many times have you had your life where you've been blessed and you literally have probably been like internally, maybe even some of your actions, you haven't been living like the way that you like the best you've ever lived. And you've seen God just show up. They're like, oh, a lot. I'm like, but yet and still, we still think it's our behavior. Yeah. Now, it doesn't mean our behavior doesn't matter, but most of the times people behave to get. And I actually think, and this is something I've never said before, I actually think God does that. Like when we have, when I'm talking about when we have done things and we're living in a way in a manner that does not honor him. And it's like, I'm not talking about like, you're deliberately, it's just, you're working through, you're working through your sanctification process, whatever. I actually think God many times blesses us in those moments to try to teach us, but we're so hard to learn to teach us like, it has nothing to do with your behavior. My love, it has nothing to do with your behavior because we're still on that rat race that if I just behave, if I just do this, then God's going to be like this. So he's going to be this genie in a bottle that if I say this enough times, then all of a sudden he gives me what I want. And that's not how it works.
Right. Well, just this morning, we had a really big meeting and the TV wasn't working. It wasn't like connecting to project what we were trying to project. And I was really like calling upon God and all the spirits
to help you get
to please make this TV to work. Which ultimately, because my intention was off. Yeah. Which would make it sorcery.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. But there's also on the other side of that, there's been many times we've been in situations where like we're like, we're trying to do something and it's like nothing and it's a big
and
deal.
Pray to
and
God.
we stop and like, God, would you please just help us right now? And it happens.
So what makes that a soft form of sorcery versus
the other side,
a belief in like the ultimate authority and his intentional care for you?
Because I actually think that's the difference. I think the mentality is this. I think God actually cares a ton about the world we live in. I think he cares a lot about us. I always say this. He's like, that's the one thing that amazes me about God. He's incredibly powerful, yet he's incredibly personal, right? It's the idea in Psalm where it actually says this, where it talks a ton about, like, talks about the idea of that, who is man that you're mindful of him? Mm-hmm. The idea of how this God who made the whole universe and beyond, and it's like all this, and he's like, oh, but also he's mindful of you. Mm-hmm. And so, and I think he wants you to know, like, he hears and you can talk to him and he hears your prayers. And then I think in a moment he shows up in those moments. I mean, it's like really interesting. Like I had this happen recently. I was on my way to San Antonio. So I'm on my way to San Antonio. As I'm walking through San Antonio and I'm going to San Antonio, I get on this train.
That bell ringing is like the Spirit's calling.
Yeah, the Spirit's calling out. So I get on this train and I'm in the train in Dallas. I got plenty of time to get to my flight. It's thunderstorm. This is the last flight to get to San Antonio because my other flight got canceled because we were late. I get on this train, got plenty of time to get there on the train through Dallas. All of a sudden I'm on the train literally stops. Like it doesn't go anywhere. The train literally stops. So as this train has stopped, I'm like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. And so next thing you know, I'm like, I don't know how much time we got. And I started looking more and more. I'm like, oh, I got 10 minutes. Oh, I got 15. And it just keeps going down. And I'm like, I'm not going to make it. And the train just keeps going slower and slower. And I'm like, I'm about to miss my flight. I'm going to have to try to drive to San Antonio. If I have to drive to San Antonio, then I'm going to have to drive to a thunderstorm and do all this type of stuff. So I'm sitting there. And now all of a sudden, I just literally stopped. I was like, God, I have to get there. Would you please let this train move? And I'm telling you, all of a sudden, that train moved so fast. Like as soon as I prayed it, I'm talking about as soon as I prayed it, the train moved. Mm-hmm. And I literally I'm on the train. And I literally just lift my hands. I'm like, oh my God, praise God. That's amazing. Now, yeah. I know. Now, somebody may have asked me in that moment, do I think like was God? Yes, I do. I actually believe. And why did he do that for me? I don't know. But what I know, I prayed that and he did. And I've had moments like that all the time, right? I've had moments with my kids where my kids were there and they were younger and it's completely bright outside, nothing. And they were like, man, can I ask God for it to rain? Because we just got done reading the story about Elijah and it got done raining. I was like, yeah, you should ask. And seriously. And they would pray like, God, please, when it rain, they'll close their eyes. And then all of a sudden it's like, I'm like, all right. And then I'm over there too. Like, please God, like let it rain. And then all of a sudden it was like literally like 10, 15, 20 seconds later, it just gets dark and it rains. I'm like, I was like, oh, this works. Like, you know what I'm saying? But it's like one of those things I think that God just does have that thing where he wants that he is involved in our lives in that type of way. And I think that makes it a little bit different. Yeah.
Well, what that reminded me of is I grew up really Southern Pentecostal.
Yep.
And which was super ironic because I grew up like I can't watch Harry Potter. I couldn't even play cards.
Yeah.
And then I would go to church, not just on Sunday. I'd go Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, and like prayer meetings and stuff and tent revivals. And people are running around yelling, like sounding like they're casting spells. And then people are falling on the floor when they cast a spell. And like, so I like, can you help me understand, like just from your perspective, like what we're talking about is kind of like signs and wonders. And at what point does like as someone of faith who believes in that, does it cross a threshold into something that is more performance driven and more control and like power based that I would say can hit an extreme of like magic?
Yeah, no, there's a lot that happens I think there's a lot of stuff that happens in Christianity that's more demonic than it's Christian.
No, because I'm like sitting there and I'm like, I think we're calling upon more than God.
Oh, no. Because I think one, it's always about the intention of your heart. And I think that is the difference. I think the intention, you can sit there and pray and say whatever you want to say. I think about our country right now. Mm-hmm. Like I legit think about our country right now. And there are people who legitimately are like, who pray that are like saying they're Christian and all that, but yet and still the literal hatred they have in their hearts toward people, or in the past where people justified the slavery of people and they were like, oh yeah, I'm a Christian or whatever. And again, I'm not here to, but I'm saying but you think that's the spirit of God. It's not. And so I do think we can conjure those things up that can create that. I also think too, when you're doing it, because I was, when I got saved in a charismatic world, and it was that stuff where you would get in there and people used to knocking, people being knocked over like it's freaking like Mortal Kombat, and you're just like, dude, I'm just like
snipers.
Yeah, you're like, what just happened? Like, you know what I'm saying? And like, and then after a while, I was like, okay, well, but then it was like, oh, man, supernatural. And what I started realizing was like, I'm like, nope. I believe in that. I believe in, and I've seen it. I've seen the miraculous hand of God. But one of the things I made a commitment to, I always tell people, I am charismatic. I am charismatic with a seatbelt, though. And the reason why is because I say, if God's going to move, it's going to be so evident. It's not going to be anything that we do that's going to make it show that God moved. Because what we end up doing, it's what you just said. It ends up being sorcery and rituals. It's the fact of, when we all get together, let's all pray in a different, let's all pray in tongues. And when we do that, we're going to bring all this stuff in here together. Like, and it's going to do this thing. Or, hey, if everyone goes and we pray and then we push people, they're all going to get knocked over. And my whole point used to always be like, I was like, maybe I'm just not, like, I'm too practical. I was like, what's the point of getting knocked over? Right? Because what we do is we look at Paul. Oh, Paul's knocked off his horse. Yes, literally, the dude who was murdering Christians was on a donkey, and God speaks and yeah, you know what? I think if I get knocked off horse and hear something speak from heaven, I'm like, yeah, that's probably God, right? But we just begin to take things that people do in the Bible, and then we try to build. It's like, it's no different. We try to build a ritual to get this thing. It's no different. We try to do this, you get this. And that's why Jesus did so many miracles so different. Right. That's why he didn't do every miracle the same. Why? Because he knew, he was trying to get us to understand it's not about the thing, it's about me. It's not about that. He just says, man, we're called to lay hands and pray for people. Man, okay, great, that's it. What happens after that? That's on God. That has nothing to do with me. And I think that's the difference right there.
Yeah, well, I was that kid who, like, I'd have to go and stand in the line to get, like, prayed for and stuff, and people were like falling out, and then the person would like put their hand on my forehead, and I would literally be sitting there with my heels drug into the ground.
Of course you would. Yes.
If it's God, I'm a fall. But if it's your hand pushing me down, I'm gonna stand right here. But well, okay, to our listeners, like I'm like giggling, we're making jokes. It's like a completely different type of conversation than I feel like maybe you're used to us having, but we want to have more of these and just like a raw back and forth on what we're thinking and how we're critically thinking about it. So the next question that I have is, how does imagination play a part in this? Like, at what point does imagination maybe cross that line into engaging with unknown spirits and forces?
Yeah. Well, I think imagination is a good thing. I think imagination is a deal to where you're able to you can take things, it can be within like your head. And that's the beauty of being a human being. Right. Human beings can have an idea that sits here, and within that idea from sitting here, it actually can manifest itself and bring its idea. I think that's the beautiful part of like being a creator and being in a creation and on and on. I think that part's beautiful. And so I think when it gets crazy, I think when it gets there is when like you're just doing this to escape, right? And I think that at times can move to those different things.
Interesting. Something that we were saying earlier on that like why this conversation is so interesting to me is because I genuinely do come at it with the heart of like curiosity and compassion, even though there are things that I fully believe in. I guess I understand what it would be like to be like a young man or like a young woman right now who is really not trusting of authority, not trusting of institutional power from a religious standpoint, and definitely not trusting of like Christianity. And that leading you to be someone who doesn't trust in these movements or of religion, and that pushing you to be somebody who's more individualistic and more self-focused. I too would turn to something like astrology to bring some form of guidance to how I like work within my internal world. So I think I just share that to say like that's why the conversation is so exciting for me, because I really do understand why people find themselves there. And I guess like for that group of people, what do you think is what's the better offer?
Yeah, that's why I believe that when you actually think about the Bible, you think about Christianity, I do believe it's a better offer, because here's why. It's because I think what people are wanting, they know deep in their core that they need something more than themselves. So that's why they're looking for guidance. They're looking for some. They're it's feeling like a sojourner on this journey through this life, and you're like, man, I don't know. And you're just like, you need something greater. And I think that's the call of a human heart. That's why the Bible says clear. It's that the idea that God's law is written on every human heart. The Bible says that we're made in God's image. There's a longing for something more, and we know that we actually belong to something. And what we will do is just do these other things to try to find that in our own strength. But ultimately, what it comes down to is that there's a God. And unfortunately, what we've done in Christianity, we've made him to just be this rules dude, this guy up in heaven. It seems like he's just like, I mean, I always tell people there's a former coach in the NBA named Greg Popovich. And Greg Popovich was like this, I mean, great coach, but Pop was very like, just like, it looks like he was frustrated and mad all the time. He would do the interviews after a quarter. It was always quick, one answer. I'm like, most of us think God's like Greg Popovich. He's just up there just freaking just mad all the time, and just this like kind of just grumpy old dude. Right. And what I tell people is like, no, we've lost the allure, and we've lost like the imagination of who he is. And like, I think that's what we have to capture again. I think that's what was the beauty of C.S. Lewis and J.R. Tolkien. They had an imagination. They were able to create with their imagination. They were able to go and to create this thing to where they could see there's something more in the supernatural part of who they were. And so I think that's what has to happen, is that we have to begin to bring story back. We have to begin to bring stuff back in branding and art form and all that stuff that allows people to begin to see things in a different way and in a different manner. And I think as we can do that in this compelling story, because if you think about every like fairy tale, right? Think about fairy tale. Literally fairy tales, why they capture our heart so much is because fairy tales are literally made like there's a story. It's like the story of God, right? You think about fairy tale, it's once upon a time. It's like, in the beginning, right? There was nothing wrong. Then what happens in a fairy tale? There's introduced an adversary. The adversary comes on, and what does he do? He puts a spell on humanity, on the whoever, or something happens, right? And then what's next? Then there's a prince. And so in the Bible, Genesis 3, there's a Satan, there's the adversary, right? The spell happens. Then you have what? The prince, which is, you have Prince Charming and other things. You have Jesus. And then what happens? Happily ever after. That's the book of Revelation, right? It all just fits a narrative in a story. That's why because if you really, let's be honest, when you look at fairy tales, like them things are trash. Like the actual like writing of fairy, they're trash. Like, I mean, I know people are gonna be like, when you read like the story, it's not like that compelling. It's not that deep, but
there's definitely no revelation.
It's not. You're like, oh, let me see what's gonna happen. But what does it do? It pierces something in your heart, which here's a side note. This is a side quest, but I'm gonna come back to what I was saying. What was this? Who's the story with the porridge and the
Goldilocks?
Yeah.
And the three bears?
Goldilocks, let me tell you that right now. Goldilocks was the first Karen. Here's why. Here's why Goldilocks was the first Karen. You break up into their crib, eat their porridge, and you got a problem. I'm like, that's the most privileged thing I've ever seen. You just gonna break up into the bear crib. They ain't even bothering you. And you come up there and eat their food, and they gonna put it on them.
And then the little bear's crying.
Yeah, little bear's over there like,
food is gone and his bed's not
where's my grub at? And because freaking
and she like broke their chair, I think.
Yeah, because Karen walked in here talking about like
it's like furniture around.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. If it was modern day, they'd have called she would have called the police. You know what I'm saying? I guarantee it was a black bear too, wasn't it? You know what I'm saying?
It sounds like something a little white girl would do.
Hey, Oscar was a black bear. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't no brown. It wasn't no brown bear. It wasn't no polar.
Break into your house, eat your food.
It wasn't no polar bear. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't the other one gonna be no polar bear. But going back to what I was saying, it's this though. But I think those stories aren't that deep, but it does when you like even when I would watch it with my daughters, right? It would I would watch stories like I would watch, you watch a story like a Frozen, or you watch a Tangled, or you watch something like that. It would do something within my heart because I'm like, because it speaks to like this creation story. It speaks to like, man, we're living in this world and one day it will be better. But right now we're living in that not yet, but almost. And so it's kind of like this whole like deal. And I think one place I want to go and talk about is like, but I do think we're living like in a really high level of a spell right now.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was kind of about to go towards this direction.
Okay.
I can ask my question and then you can kind of go where you're going. I am interested in bringing into this conversation some of the things that we've recently seen with like Bethel.
Yeah.
We really could do, I think, multiple episodes on magic, and then you could get into prophecy, you can get into Nephilim, you can get into so many different components. But I think the reason why I bring that up is because I think right now it's a relevant story of someone who was using something like prophecy, which from an outsider perspective would look at Christian prophecy and see it as a form of magic. And then the intentions are impure. And so they're then utilizing this for own power, control, whatever that might be. What level of dark influence is going on within that? Is it the person is engaging with darkness because they are allowing their poor intentions to go like unmanaged? Or do you think that there's like a greater force that's even more evident beyond their human choice?
I think what it comes down to is that it's the brokenness and the wickedness of the human heart. And I think what it ends up being is that it becomes about, like, say, I believe in those things. I believe prophecy is real. I've experienced it. It's been very impactful in my life. But the whole point of it, it's to be an encouragement to someone else. And when people start doing that stuff, when people start taking prophecy and I'm going to go on Facebook or Instagram or Snap or whatever to find out more stuff about you, here's what it's doing. What you're saying, it's no longer about the person. It's about you. It's about how you're viewed and how you're seeing, oh, I want people to then be wowed by what I do. I want people to be wowed by what I'm able to say. I want people to be, it's about me. It's not about the person. And see, that's when it starts getting sideways. See, that's the problem with and again, when like Christianity, you have to be very careful as things grow, because what you will do, you'll be known for something that's actually real. And then that'll become your stick. That'll become the thing that you just do, right? You just are like, you've seen the people, they like, they're the person who just, they have the props. And then all of a sudden it turns into like this like carnival up there when they're preaching. You have people who are up there and man, maybe it's the supernatural where God literally is moving through their ministry. Now all of a sudden they're putting gold dust in the freaking, like, they're putting gold dust in the air vents. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, it's just stuff like that. And it's like, man.
Dancing on graves and stuff?
What do you say?
Dancing on graves and stuff?
Dancing on graves and stuff. I mean, dude, they got stuff like the Holy Spirit tunnel where like you literally, they form like, it looks like a freaking like, the line where you're, for their name the starting lineup in basketball, it's like a tunnel and people are just praying over you as you go through it and they get like the spirit of laughter and whatever. I'm like, dog, that is demonic.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. That used to, whenever I was growing up, people used to laugh like crazy.
They're
drunk in the spirit.
Yeah, they're drunk. That's what I'm saying. They would say they're drunk in the spirit. I'm like, dog, get out of here, man. Miss me with that. Now, again, but again, what we do is we think we can read, again, it's because it's something like, it's like the Bible and it's this tension. We go to one side or the other. We go to crazy or we go to the other side of it where it doesn't exist. And it's like, no, you have to manage the tension, because on the other side, what you're trying to do, you're trying to control because you're like, well, they're crazy. And on this side. And so what you have to do is you have to manage the tension of this and be spirit-led in that process, because I think that that's where people kind of walk and they go and they move. And I think that's how you have to like consistently keep going and moving forward in that type of way.
Yeah. And I guess to be clear to you, I absolutely think that you can encounter an overwhelming presence of God to the point where it brings you so much joy that it's like, I want to run around, like I want to jump, or like I am laughing. So I also just want to say that I do completely agree with that experience. It's the mass production and curating of an environment that is off-putting to me.
Yes, and it's off-putting because it's not like, because here's what I would say, because then it's like, well, I create this environment that's going to usher this in, versus saying like, man, like, I believe there is a God. I believe that those who see, this is what I've seen, those who see supernatural things happen, this is the biggest thing I've seen with them. They walk in a closer relationship with God. It's not they've created the environment where faith is all. No. They just walk in a closer relationship with God. They're like, oh man, that person knows God. They're friends with God. They walk with him. They talk to him. They know it. They understand it. That's the difference. And I think what we've created, and I think that's what society has seen. I think that's where the next generation has seen, and they've had issues with, has been that part. That this generation has seen the people who are out there conjuring things up, creating these environments, and they're like, yo, that's fake. And then we've been told it's real. And then they come out, find out later, everything they thought was real or they thought was fake. And then all of a sudden now they distrust versus being like, man, it's just like, I think it's all about your heart posture. Yeah. And I think you have to fight that because it's very seductive to find yourself. I get more and more why Jesus, when his ministry would grow, he would shrink it because power is so seductive. It is the most seductive thing because it can make you start to think. And but here's what's crazy. He was God in the flesh. And even him, when he got big, oh, no. He'd say something crazy about the ministry would shrink. Because, again, he knew who he was and he knew what that could do, I believe. And I believe it was a model for us. I think that's why empowerment is so important. Why I talk about empowerment so much is because I believe empowerment is a thing that, like, keeps you in your heart right, that does not keep you to then creating rituals and magic and things because I got to keep this thing going now. Right. You know what I'm saying? And then and it hoards power and stuff like that.
So how do you think that we're under a spell?
I think we're under a spell right now is because like I when I'm watching people and it's been over the last several years, let's start back and through the 2020s. And I know some people may have issues with this. They're gonna have issues with everything I say now, but it's like, here's the deal. When we started talking about like gender and we start saying things that are very like, I mean, just listen, we're very clear from an anatomy standpoint of male, female. That's not been debated in like human history, right? Something that clean, that whatever. We start saying, oh, I don't know if that's real or not. I don't know if those things are like things that are solid. And so what do we, that's an illusion. That's this thing where we're like, things that are just like, no. They're telling you, no, what we know to be true, no, that's not real, right? That's like me looking at you, I'm like, no, bro, you're not white. No. That jacket you have, it's not black. It's like, no, it is. They're like, no, it's not. It's actually blue. And you're like, no, it's no. And then somebody else said, like, it's blue. And we're like, you're like, maybe it is blue, right? Yeah. We've lived under that. Second thing is this right now. I was sitting there watching our president, his State of the Union address, and it was like watching somebody, it was like watching Theoden in Two Towers of a king under a spell. Like everything he says, I mean, it's just like he just keeps saying stuff that I'm like, that's not real. It's an illusion. And what I mean by that, and we've like come to understand it. We're like, oh, it's the fake news. No, we've heard you say that 4 times. And it's like we have now built a world to where even things we see with our own eyes and we have it fact checking this, we'll still say, no, that's the progressive left or that's the radical right. You're like, no, that's real. And now we're living under that. And so even everybody that's around him, they just feed, it's the emperor no clothes, they just feed into it. Then he goes, and what starts to happen next is he's on this situation where before he goes into his whole deal when he's talking about his cabinet meeting. And at his cabinet meeting, he's there. And in his cabinet meeting, he's sitting there. And everybody also has to say this to him in his cabinet meeting. Oh, hey, President Trump, you're the greatest. Man, what you've done to the cabinet. It's like all this, like thanking everything he's done. And I'm like, dude, what are we doing? And it's just like, we're not connected to reality. Like we're sending people to war right now on a war that has this has nothing to do with the safety of Americans. This has nothing to do with it. And it's like, and we've been made to believe things that are not real. And this has been going on for a while. And I think that the freedom, and everybody's looking for a white wizard to come save us, but it's not happening. I believe human beings, when we live disillusioned, when we don't live authentic, we live under illusion. We live under a spell. And I think the way you free yourself is by living integrated, by actually facing reality of who you are, being tough enough to remain that, and then taking what you have, your skills and your gifts, and go give it to the world. That's how we break out of the spell.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah. One of the reasons in wanting to talk about this is because I've been getting so much on social media and just like engaged with different types of things like tarot card readers. Yep. It's like super trendy right now for people to be like, oh, I'm a witch. Yep. And there's like jokes right now talking about like bringing back jesters. Yeah. Which is like, because things are so crappy. One of the things that I've realized just from, I guess, pattern recognition, I think this is in the data too, typically those who practice these rituals, again, at whatever range of the spectrum, are usually marginalized people group. Yes. And so I think there is a lot to say about like when we as like the church isolate people from being able to experience God, whether that's in our day-to-day interaction with people when we pick and choose like who we want to interact with, or actually in the space that is like being welcomed into the space of the church, and we limit the ability to experience it in community. We are also like offering up the opportunity for people to find their place and find their belonging in a completely different space.
Yeah, no, that's the beauty of, I think, and where it hasn't, where I think that's the beauty of the church, and where I think times hasn't been. There are a lot of them who are, but it is a community. And that's what some people would say against Christianity. They used to say, oh, it was something made up by those who were poor to give them a sense of like hope in this world, right? But honestly, it was the place for those, because that's who Jesus was. It was a place for the misfits. It was the misfit toys. It was those who were not accepted in society. It was those who didn't. It were the women who had no rights. It was the slave. It was those who were crippled. There was all those people who actually were welcome in. And I think that's what the church is about, because it was about finding community and finding a place of belonging. And it was not belonging based off of like your socioeconomic class or your skin color or based off of your gender or whatever. It was based off the fact that we have this belief in Jesus and we believe in that. And in that keeps us together, because when you have something beyond yourself that keeps you together or that brings you together, then that's what keeps you together. But if it becomes about what brings us together is based off of a creation type thing, at some point in time, somebody's going to violate that. At some point in time, somebody's not going to agree. And it's going to then turn into this whole other freaking thing versus it being a deal to where, man, what keeps us together? Because now, you know what, there's ethics. You got to forgive. I've got to do this. And it allows you to show the world that. And I think that's the beauty of the church. I believe why I love the church, why I think the church is something that needs to be more and more out there, is because I think when it's functioning and working healthy, I believe it really is a blessing to communities. But I think that's where it's got to get back to. And I think because Christianity has been a thing that's been popular in society, or just, especially we live in the South, and it's just part of it, I think what's really starting to happen is there's going to be a deep meaning of communities that are going to happen and start to take place.
Yeah, well, I think that we could do so many different episodes on this, because like I have questions about the three wise men being astrologists and like all of the all of the different things. So I think that we can continue this conversation at a later time, because we have another meeting today. But I will say to our listeners, thank you for listening. I know this is a completely different style of conversation than we've been having for a while now, but every now and then we're going to come on here and have just like candid conversations about the things that we're viewing in culture and that we think are important. You get to hear us critically think in real time. And just kind of talk back and forth as we're continuing to learn as well, and how that applies to what we believe is our purpose in order to create opportunity in the world for people to find theirs. I would promo for this episode is we have a Substack. It's at AuthenticaX, and we will be dropping articles on topics like magic and human design and all the different things that we're doing in the organization. So check out our Substack, because it's a new app for the girls.
It is definitely a new app. And I say, even with the fellas are jumping on Substack too. They really are. So,
I'm just kidding.
I know. No, listen, when dudes jump on something, I like it. I ain't on bro Substack though.
Yeah, bro Substack shouldn't exist, because it's bro podcast. Like podcast is for the bros, Substack is for the girls.
It is. Bros, we got to, like I told you, they don't want me to be president, because I'll tell you right now, the president had this tariff, something right there. There would have been 100% tariff on podcast equipment, 100%. So anyway, hey, well, guys, we hope today was helpful. Until next time, keep writing new rules.